Welcome to Paradelphia Radio. This is Rick Pruitt, once again here in the Toxic Studios, and I am with my longtime nemesis, Mr. Toxic Skeptic.
Nemesis?
Michael.
I would have taken hetero life mate.
You're my nemesis. But today is.
Oh, are you going to let the people know?
I'm going to let them know.
Oh,
today is your birthday.
It is my birthday.
So happy birthday to my nemesis.
Do we ever just stop acknowledging birthdays? It feels like I've gotten old enough that, who cares?
Well, Mike, if you want them to stop acknowledging birthdays and stop ordering the cakes for yourself and the pony rides and all that shit.
No, I can't go without the pony rides, goddammit.
Your house has balloons up all over the place. I mean, it's kind of hard to ignore.
But a pony just screams, jump on me, and ride me around. It doesn't matter how old you are. A pony screams, why are you not riding me?
I have so many jokes. So anyway, happy birthday.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be having you join me here for my birthday this evening. We did not have the earlier show, which is Taking It Deep with the Godfrey. So you are the one and only show here in the studio for my birthday. Mazel tov. Later on, we'll order the strippers and do the shots, because that's what old men are supposed to do. We're not allowed to have ponies anymore.
What I'm hearing is I'm the one who ruined your birthday by working tonight.
You know as well as I do, when you do something you're passionate about, it's not work. It's fun.
I get it.
And sitting here with you, I wouldn't want to spend it any other way.
Well, we have an interesting show tonight because for your birthday, we have a show that may explain to you reasons why you have been here before. You may have had 45 other incarnations with birthdays ranging from 2 years old to 100 years old. Who knows? This is just the most recent version of Skeptic Mike.
That could explain a lot of things.
There
if we can get to the bottom of it.
There could have been a Skeptic Mike back in the Middle Ages. There could have been one, no,
because that's
in the Roaring 20s.
That Skeptic Mike would have gotten stoned to death. That Skeptic Mike,
I got to tell you,
who started asking questions.
Keep your shit up. It's going to happen in this lifetime too.
Mike kept on questioning everything. We had to take him out. We can't have somebody that questions everything.
I can't do a show like this with Skeptic Mike.
What happened? He just kept asking why.
He just kept saying he didn't believe in it.
No, I'm excited. I've said this before to you. The guests that you bring on here are some of the most interesting people I've ever listened to. And I love, during your interviews, it's just you and the interviewee. I kind of take a sidestep to it, but I definitely sit here the whole entire time like an audience member, and I get as excited as everybody else that listens to it to kind of either learn something new, to find out why things happen, or to kind of just find out weird stuff that goes on in the world.
Yeah.
And you've run the gamut, so I'm excited for tonight's guest.
Cool. And pull up a chair because we do have our guest waiting in the wings here. His name is James Matlock. He is co-author of a couple of books. First one here we're going to talk about tonight is called Signs of Reincarnation. He's also co-authored a book called I Saw a Light and Came Here, Children's Experiences of Reincarnation. He has worked for or at the American Society for Psychical Research in New York City and at the Rhine Research Center in Durham, North Carolina. And his chief research interests are reincarnation, near-death experiences, and other phenomena suggestive of post-mortem survival. So, Jim, welcome to Paradelphia Radio.
Well, hi, Rick. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for, again, taking time out of your schedule and giving us some of that time and going over what I find is one of the most, if not the most fascinating topics that we talk about here on this show. Reincarnation. Yeah. I'm sure you feel the same way given that bio I just read.
Yeah, I do. Yes, it's very important research, and there's far more of it than I think many people realize, and so it's important to me to get that out. I'm very happy to talk with you.
Yeah. So let's dig right into this here. This book we're going to focus on tonight is called Signs of Reincarnation, and we were talking a little bit prior to the show tonight, and I kind of mentioned that I think people who are very skeptical about this topic, they need some type of tangible proof. Somebody saying they remember something. Well, I can say I remember something. That's not tangible proof.
Right.
But if you come back and you actually say, point A, point B, point C, and here it is in the real world, these are points that are irrefutable. Then it starts to get a little more difficult to question this. And that's mainly what your book is about.
That's right. That's what the research has been about. Ian Stevenson, who was at the University of Virginia, was the person who started this systematically in 1961. So 60 years this has been going on now, this type of research, going into the field and, interviewing people, interviewing parents of children. Usually it was young children whose cases he was studying. And he would go into the field, and he would talk to the children. He would talk to their parents. He would talk to everybody who had heard the child talk about their memories. And the exciting thing about these Asian cases, and many of them were Asian, we now know that they also occur plentifully in the West too, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But the children often said enough that you could go back. And find the people they claimed that they had been, right?
Yeah.
So you could actually verify their memories. And at that point, when the previous person was identified, then it gets even more exciting because it turns out that personalities matched, that behaviors, sometimes idiosyncratic behaviors of the child made sense because they were also behaviors of the previous person. Different physical things made sense. Maybe the child has a birthmark, which turned out to be correlated to a wound or a scar on the previous person. So, these cases end up involving a lot more than simply memories.
Right.
Now, that's where they start.
Yeah. Now, in your book, you make a statement that you believe natural past life memories are better or more, I guess, easy to follow up on than memories that are generated under hypnosis. Why is that?
Well, they're easier, but it's also when they are followed up. The memories that come spontaneously in the waking state or in dreams, but without hypnosis, without any other induction procedure, tend to be more reliable too. I mean, they're more evidential, right? And part of that. I think is because the spontaneous memories usually relate to a life that was lived not very long in the past. In many Asian cases, it can be just, in Western too. So let's just say in cases it can be, just a few months. It can be a few days, as a matter of fact, a few months in the past that the previous person died, a few years. In the West, it can be a little bit longer. The median in the Western cases is more like 25 years than a few months. But still, we're talking about lives that were lived not all that long ago. Whereas with regressions, you often get lives that were lived hundreds of years ago or, back in ancient times, when there weren't records, as plentifully as there are now. There weren't people still living who can remember things. And so it's much more difficult to verify them.
Right.
But when you do have enough to go on, it turns out very often that the regression cases do not check out as often as the spontaneous cases do.
Yeah. Is there? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to, so the reason I say that is not just not just a belief, but the belief is backed up, by research.
Yeah. Is there a pattern to when and how quickly a person may reincarnate?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Well, there are certain patterns that play into this. If a person dies particularly young, they're more likely to come back quickly. If a person dies violently, they're more likely to come back quickly. And interestingly enough, if they die by suicide, they're especially likely to come back quickly.
Interesting. So it's almost like if it was not, your life was not meant to end, or you didn't get a chance to fulfill your purpose. Do you think that plays into it?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it has to. One of the variables that we look at is what we call unfinished business, right? And this is something Stevenson noticed also. I mean, Stevenson, by the end, he died in 2007, but by the end, for him, he had studied, about over 2,500 cases he had documented, and and in about 1,700 of those cases, they had been able to identify the previous person. They'd been able to solve the case, is the term he used. That's the term we use now for a case that's been verified, that we've determined, who the previous person, talked about was, that the child, typically as a child, identifies with. Because it's more than they just talk about them. They talk about them in the first person. They really, truly, completely identify with these people,
right?
Psychologically. So, and then, of course, as I said, there are also the behaviors and the physical things that go along with that.
Yeah, and children that have these past life memories, that's to me, that's the most compelling thing of all, because, these kids, they don't have any concept. When I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, I had no concept of what a past life even was, to make up some kind of a story, let alone have it be a story where you actually had fine points that matched up in real life. I mean, that's ridiculous. That there's the it's kind of like that thing where they say if there's a tornado that goes through a pile of junk, in a billion, 1 in a billion chance that it'll form a airplane out of the junk, when it goes through. It's kind of the same the same idea. Like, it's just, what are the odds of something like that happening, and then happening over and over?
Happening over and over again. And we're talking about young kids. We're talking about kids 2 and 3 years old.
Right.
That come out with things, that turn out to be true. I mean, it's just, I mean, and when you see so many of these cases, and they fit into various patterns that we'll talk about, I'm sure. I mean, it just, you get to the point where reincarnation no longer simply has to be just a belief. There really is evidence for it now,
right.
And as we become if you really study this evidence, you can get to the point where you don't have any question anymore. I mean, It just becomes intellectually irresponsible not to acknowledge it.
Right. Now, your book. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think I was just going to repeat something similar to that. So the thought was complete. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, your book, Signs of Reincarnation, we've been talking about these childhood memories, and your book starts out with a really, really interesting case from Louisiana about a little girl who was killed in on the ground in a plane crash that happened in a small town in Louisiana back in the early 70s, I believe. Can you explain what happened there?
Actually, it was the 80s, not the 70s, that she died.
Sorry.
It was a Pan Am plane. Pan Am plane took off from the New Orleans airport, hit a low-altitude wind shear, and crashed into a residential neighborhood less than a mile from the end of the runway. So it was like immediately upon takeoff. Mm-hmm. It came right down. And, of course, everybody on the plane was killed, but 6 people on the ground were killed, too. Among them, this girl, 11-year-old girl, who was in the carport of her house talking on a phone. Now, back in 81, I mean, we didn't have cell phones, I mean, this would have been a wired phone. The kitchen door was right opposite, I went to this neighborhood, and, her house was totally gone now. I mean, there's another house in its place. But there was another house in the neighborhood, just a couple of blocks away from it, where I saw a carport with a swing. I mean, in this neighborhood, there actually are swings in the carport. They're on the side, the outside, so there's plenty of room for parking the car too. But they're on the outer side of the carport so that you can swing, and if it's a sunny day, you swing out into the sun, and you come back. Or you can just sit still under the carport. But anyway, she was sitting on the swing in the carport, and she saw this plane crash coming right towards her, right? So she was killed. She was one of the people on the ground who was killed then. And the case was actually of an Oklahoma girl, so not a Louisiana girl who remembered her life, but an Oklahoma girl in a completely unrelated family who was born she was 10 when I interviewed her, and I'm trying to think where we're 2021 now, so but she was born many years after that, and one thing that makes it and she recalled this, but one of the things that makes this a very interesting case is that before she began to recall what had happened, that is the plane crash and so forth, she started exhibiting traumatic behaviors, like sleepwalking, like wanting the tags cut out of her shirts, complaining that the shirts hurt her back, complaining that it felt like her skin was burning, right? I mean, this started when she was 2.
Right.
And continued for several years until she started having clearer memories and could actually explain what this was about. So that's one of the things that makes this case very interesting, is that you had the behaviors starting before the memories.
Right, and that's got to be something that sounds just like kids talking nonsense to a parent. Like your first instinct isn't going to be to say, "Well, my kid must be having a past life memory or experience." You're just thinking your 2-year-old's acting goofy because she doesn't want her tags in her shirts.
Yeah, right. I mean, and this girl, she started off, sleeping through the night, no problem. She was a model child. And then all of a sudden, this sort of stuff started. And there was nothing in her life that could explain it, it totally baffled the family. And you can imagine what the family went through,
right?
In dealing with this.
And I think it had to do with the way the woman, or the girl died in Louisiana, right?
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, it did, absolutely. I mean, you can imagine, dying in that way, sitting and, seeing a plane crash into you, come towards you. And now when she was, it gets very interesting, because when I interviewed her at 10, I went out to Oklahoma and interviewed her. And one of the things that she told me was that something that she had just recently remembered, and that is that she thought that she had died by electrocution over the telephone line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when I went, and this does actually happen sometimes, it's rare, but you can be electrocuted over the telephone line. Now, when I went out to Louisiana to investigate this case there, because that's how we investigate both sides of the cases, right? Both the children with the memories, and then the people that they remember having been. We research both sides.
Right.
So when I went to Louisiana to research that side, I learned some really interesting things. Among other things, at the time of the plane crash, both the power lines and the phone lines were strung on the same poles, and they were immediately in front of her house. Okay, so the plane, as it came towards the house, sliced right through them.
Right.
Okay. Moreover, the power lines in 1982 were not insulated. So uninsulated power lines would have come in contact with the phone lines, which were strung 18 inches or so below them, right? I mean, so it's possible then that there would have been a charge sent up the phone line.
Mm-hmm.
It did blow the transformer, and the other thing is that I got hold of her autopsy report, the child's autopsy report.
Right.
And that was very interesting, too, because none of the people that I talked to really knew.
Well, think we just lost Jim. We'll try and get him back on here. All right, the phone line dropped here. Let me go.
Oh my.
Hang on. Let me.
I still have him on here. Nope. There he goes. Terminated call.
Okay.
I have no idea what happened.
All right. Well, we'll get him to call.
We will get him back ASAP. That cut off like somebody cut the line in his house. That was a weird, just out of nowhere, bam, gone. Yeah, his phone line just dropped.
Yeah, that's a shame too. We were right.
That was a very good story too.
Yeah, we'll pick it up in a second here. Hopefully,
I gotta say, if I am Skeptic Mike. If there are things as spirits, they cut off that phone line quick as hell.
Yeah, well, I was going to tell you something after the show, but you might want to check the video at 21 minutes.
I'm going to check the video.
I'll tell you why. Because over my right shoulder here, I thought I saw something white move up here. I'm not even messing with it.
All right, now you're going to freak.
I'm not even messing with it.
Now you're going to freak.
I didn't want to interrupt.
See?
I didn't want to interrupt the story, but yeah, I caught
Dude,
my eye.
if I see something behind you, like we're trashing the whole episode. That's it.
Just a little puff of almost like a puff of smoke.
Trashing the whole episode. That's it. I'm quarantining everybody out of the studio for a week.
I'm just telling you.
I'm bringing in like Rick Moranis. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do, but something's going to happen.
Got to check that video.
Jesus Christ. And I'm looking at our internet feed and everything. Everything looks clean and everything's going out to the world. Everybody, I'm sorry, I haven't changed over my video. I should put myself on the screen, shouldn't I? At least if we're going to have a little chit chat while we wait for Jim to come back. Because, I mean, honestly, maybe his phone ran out of battery life and we've got nothing.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not, but, things happen, bro. Things happen.
In my mind, I'm thinking landline. So, yeah, maybe. It's funny how I do that.
You are thinking, you are that guy.
Right, I am that. You're right. Maybe his phone ran out of juice, but in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah.
Right away, you went to the landline.
The landline was cut,
maybe the payphone he was on. Just he didn't have enough quarters to pay for what he wanted to pay for.
With the
that's where you're going
with the pay was a pay card. Remember those?
By the way, people in the chat room, Dave Ayers, he is the host of Bleeding Edge here on Saturday nights. Ooh, that kind of didn't go right. It brought up your thing. I was going to bring up his comment. He says, a ghost in the studio would explain so many things.
It would.
You are not wrong, Dave. You are not wrong.
It would.
But
it would.
I hope that it doesn't explain so many things.
But yeah, so as a skeptic, Mike, so what you've heard so far from what Jim's been saying, what do you think about that?
So here's the thing, and I don't want to single him out because a lot of your guests make very valid points, and some of the stories that he was telling have no. I don't want to. It's rude, kind of to say what I'm going to say in terms of a logical explanation, but it definitely makes you go, "What the hell is going on?"
Right.
What the hell is happening? Yeah. And that's but that's the kind of stories I'd like to hear. I want to be able to say to myself, okay, this sounds interesting. What is going on? And as I say that, I see the phone line pop back up. Let's see if we got Jim back on the air. Let me pull this up.
All right.
Oh, I got the wrong mouse in my hand.
Just went dead.
There he is.
There
we
we go.
Back. We got him back.
All right.
Yeah. No, I'm back, and so I'll try to pick up where I was. I was talking about Rylan. That's her name, the girl in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And the autopsy report of Jennifer, the girl whose life she recalled. And I was about to say that when I got hold of the autopsy report said that she was lying on the floor of the carport, which indicated that the plane that crashed into her house did not hit her. Moreover, the autopsy report said that there was no sign of any smoke inhalation, right? Which would mean that she did not die from the fire, even though...
Uh-oh. Happened again. Maybe we do have a ghost in here.
Oh, wait, let me get that's not the right one. I have to keep on muting and unmuting my microphone.
Yeah.
What is going on?
This is just bizarre.
It is the most bizarre thing that has happened on your show in terms of interviews. We've never had it go dead silent twice. Let me look at our system over here. Our systems are running at full blast. I don't know what that means, but the flux capacitor, I just put a banana peel in it, so it's working, and everything's up and running. Rick, don't look at me like I'm the one doing this. When you've got orbs or something floating over your back.
You, 20,
all right?
About 21 minutes. You're going to check behind me.
You bring the energy or the anomalies in with you. You're the one who welcomed them into the studio. Yeah. So if they want to mess with your show,
they follow me around.
That's up to them. I'm not even lying. Like, I've waited so long for something like this. Not that I've waited. Waiting's the wrong term. Anticipated something like this with your show. Because when we have individuals like Gene or other individuals that you've had on the show, they always talk about when you antagonize the other side or antagonize the spirits or kind of egg them on, you could be asking for something bad. And if the things that you've brought up on this show are real, I mean, the tagline to the show is, what if it's all true?
Right.
If it's all true, then, man, you've been stirring that pot. You've been stirring that pot.
Stirring that pot for almost 8 years.
You've been stirring that pot for almost 8 years, and you know what? 8 years was a long time for that pot to stir. And these mofos have come out of the woodwork to screw up your show.
Yeah, it happens.
And for you guys listening on podcast form, listen closely. You're going to hear better audio than us. Do you hear anything awkward happening? Because
it would be interesting.
It would be interesting if something is
I don't
happening
know why
here.
this particular show would happen, because you would think it would be something more antagonistic than just talking about past lives, but you never know.
Because they knew it was my birthday and they wanted to mess with me.
That might be what it is.
Like, we're going to get them.
That might be what it is.
They wanted to keep talking trash.
Yeah, right. They're sabotaging Paradelphia to get back at you.
Sabotage is what I like to call it.
For some past life regression, or past life, what am I trying to say here? Something you did wrong in a past life is what I'm getting at.
I guarantee you, if I ever find out any of my past lives, I've done some bad things. Not that I'm a bad guy.
There's been some stuff.
But there's been some stuff. I mean, I was a peeping Tom or something to that degree where I was just somebody that, nobody wanted to hang out with.
Uh-huh.
That's what I'm going to say. We got the phone lines up again. Jim is back. We're going to see if it works. You know what? Third time's a charm is what they say, Rick.
That's what they say.
They say that, and I believe in that. So let's pick up the phone line again.
All right. All right, Jim, are you there with us?
Oh, wait 1 second. I clicked the button. Nothing happened. Give me a second.
Still working out our... Are you there?
Okay.
There you go.
So am I on now?
You're back.
All right. Yeah, okay. Third time. I hope it works this time.
We just said the same thing.
So where did I cut out?
You were talking about how, was it Jennifer that was in Louisiana was found on the carport floor, and she did not have smoke inhalation.
Right. Yeah, which indicates that maybe Rylan was right in claiming that she died of electrocution, right? That would be consistent with the autopsy report, because if she did die of electrocution, her body would have fallen to the floor, right? And she would have been dead before the plane hit her. But so she remembered seeing the plane flying towards her. It would have been just a matter of seconds before the plane hit the power. Maybe at the point that plane hit the power lines.
Right.
I mean, that's what would have caused the surge, right? And just a few seconds before it then hit the house. But that's consistent with the autopsy report. But it's something nobody knew, right?
Mm-hmm.
So. The only way that she could have possibly have gotten that information really would be from her mind, right?
Right. And why would she? Living in Oklahoma, she probably didn't even know about this plane crash, you would think.
You would think. The family had certainly not heard of it. This was many years later, right?
Right.
And, Pan Am had gone defunct by that point.
Yeah.
There was no reason to know anything about it.
Yeah, so it's definitely a weird case with something that's beyond coincidence, or a few things beyond coincidence.
It's weird in some ways, but it's also typical in many other ways.
Right.
All these cases have the same sort of weirdness in that these kids talk about things that they really should not know.
Right.
That there's no way really for them to know. That their families aren't aware of.
Right.
Very often. I mean, there are cases of people remembering people in the family cases, and people remembering acquaintances, acquaintance cases. But there are also these, quote, stranger cases. That's what we call them, stranger cases, where the two families and the past and the previous person and this case subject are unknown, completely unknown to each other.
Right. Well, it's interesting.
Stranger.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up, the related cases versus the stranger cases. In your book, you reference a group up in Alaska called, I'm going to probably butcher this, but is it Tlingit? Yeah, it's just I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a what would we call it? Not a tribe, but what am I trying to say here? Indigenous.
Yeah, Native American Indian.
Native American Indian, yeah.
Right.
They have something in their belief system called a planned reincarnation. What is a planned reincarnation? How does that work according to the Tlingit up in Alaska?
Right. Well, I mean, first I should say, planned reincarnations are simply where somebody decides before they die where they want to come back, and it's not exclusive to the Tlingit. I mean, you find cases like this all over. There's a Brazilian case, there's an Indian case. They're particularly common, these planned reincarnations in animistic cultures, tribal cultures like the Tlingit, but they're not exclusive to them. But that's all it is. It's just deciding before they die where they want to come back.
So who do they appeal to for that? You know what I'm saying? Like who are they? When you say they decide beforehand, I mean, is it just they make a statement in general, or are they appealing to a deity, or how does that work?
No, I mean, they're very specific sometimes in saying that they want to come back to this or that family. I mean, there's a Tlingit case where a person chose a particular family because he said that and he chose not to go to other relatives. Now, the Tlingit are interesting, and this is true of many societies, tribal societies with clans, with lineal, I'm an anthropologist by training, lineal social organization, which means that they trace kinship exclusively through the mother or through the father, right? And instead of bilaterally like we do, where both parents are taken into account, it's straight through the mother. And in societies like that, you tend to get almost all cases being in the family and in that side of the family, right? And so they would expect to come back, a Tlingit would expect to come back to a matrilineal relative, right?
Right.
And so, but there's certain relatives that he did not want to come back to, and he told them, I don't want to come back. I want to come back to this other person who was a little bit more distant, but also, in the proper kinship position, because it's acquired a family, and the father was a good hunter, could provide well for the family, and so forth. So, he made a very rational choice of where he wanted to return, and then, sure enough, a child that was identified as him, who grew up to have his memories, was born there.
Right.
So it looks like he actually did it.
Yeah. Now, the Tlingit culture, in your book, you mentioned how they frown on children continuing to speak on reincarnation after adolescence. But the culture or the society around them does continue to still look at each person as if they were, so-and-so from a previous life, even though the children or adolescents at that point are discouraged from continuing to speak on it. Has this caused any kind of, that you are aware of, any kind of mental health issues as far as self-identity or identity crises with these kids that have become young adults, and they're kind of in a position where they can't really figure out who they are, I wouldn't imagine. Or how does that work in their culture, do you know?
Well, in general, everywhere, including in Tlingit culture, the memories fade naturally by late childhood. And so it's simply that if the memories are retained after that, the children are discouraged from remembering them or talking about them. And the idea is simply that that they need to become more concerned about the present life, to get on living in the present and not continuing to live in the past.
Right.
But those sorts of conflicts between past and present are found in every culture. This, again, is not exclusive to the Tlingit. Mm-hmm. And most children, even Tlingit children, will forget, naturally will forget the previous life before that. So it's not an absolute thing. I mean, if the children do have continue to have memories, they are sort of discouraged from talking about them. But I knowing what these cultures are like, the Amerindian cultures, they're not going to be, they're not going to, be hard and fast about it and make the children uncomfortable or anything.
Right.
It's just an expectation, and it's a mental health issue because, the longer they continue with these memories and holding on to the past, the harder it is to live in the present.
Yeah. Now, one of the signs you mentioned in your book is the appearance of either birthmarks or physical defects in the reincarnated person that correspond with how that person believes they died in a previous life. How prevalent are those cases?
Yeah, well, it's not just how they believed. It's often the life that you can verify, right?
Right.
And when you can verify the life, you can go and you can get, like I did for Ryland, the autopsy reports. You can get medical reports. You can get police reports. You can verify how a person died, right? Mm-hmm. And from the autopsy reports, you can see all the wounds on the previous person's body. Right? And then, those will line up typically with the birthmarks that the person has, right? Mm-hmm. And it may not just be birthmarks, and also be birth defects.
Right.
I mean, Stevenson, studied some cases really amazing birth defects that correlated with wounds. Mm-hmm. On the previous person.
So does it always have to be a mortal wound that results in one of these either defects or birthmarks, or can it just be an injury that happened during someone's previous life?
Yeah, it can be an injury, and it doesn't even have to be an injury. It can be things like tattoos, earring holes. There are a number of cases where earring holes show up as earring birthmarks, and sometimes indentations, and very rarely, but it does happen. There's actually, pierced ears can result in pierced ears at birth. So it seems to be anything that resonates emotionally, mm-hmm. right, with the previous person. So anything of emotional significance to the previous person. And a death wound is going to be emotionally significant, right? There's no that seems to be the main issue, the common denominator there. Yeah. That it's something that is emotionally significant.
Yeah. Now, it would seem that what we're talking about here when we're talking about reincarnation is basically the attachment of a spirit or a soul from one life into a next, and from one body into another body years later. And one thing I've always wondered, follow me on this because I'm going to go on left field for just a second. But if you think about, say, a movie like Star Wars or Star Trek, and you have the two ships that are coming together out in space, and they have to line up perfectly, and if they don't, it doesn't work well, and you either crash or you have some kind of a something goes wrong, and you have some kind of an injury or some kind of damage. Now, if you look at it, this type of situation, the reincarnation and the spirits reattaching themselves, is it possible, and has it been thought of, that maybe these reincarnations that wind up with either mental or physical illness in the next life are mistakes in docking, so to speak, in having the spirit not quite match up, and there being some kind of a mistake in connection with from one life to the next. Has that ever been considered?
That's an interesting thought. No, not that I know of. Except that I suppose that that you can get you can begin to wonder about things like that when it's not a reincarnation, when it's more of a possession type scenario, separate from a reincarnation, right?
Right.
But the easiest way to conceive of reincarnation really is as a sort of possession, I think. Mm-hmm. And that is, that I think that, people talk about, say, the soul is being what reincarnates. Well, what is the soul exactly? I think that we can put this on a more rational, or if we will, more scientific basis, if we think of it as being consciousness that leaves the body and that rejoins or reincarnates. That is, that when we die, our physical bodies die, right? Mm-hmm. Our consciousness, our minds just continue. I mean, they continue on after death until they come into association, possess a new physical body. Typically the one before it's born. Right. Sometime during gestation, perhaps at conception even.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly when. Timing probably varies. But so if we think of then of reincarnation as being a type of possession, right, of a new body, then I think a lot of things suddenly make a lot more sense. If memories are carried in consciousness, let's say in the subconscious part of the mind, right? Because there wouldn't be, none of us are aware of our previous lives all the time, right? We're not even aware of our present lives all the time until we start thinking of it, or we try to, right?
Right.
All that stuff is in our subconscious, and our personalities, and we can imagine all of that as being recorded in our subconscious. Well, if our subconscious, then part of consciousness, it carries over to the next life, it's still going to be there after you reincarnate, right? Mm-hmm. And so, bringing up memories of previous lives is the only thing that's involved there is bringing up stuff from the subconscious, right? And if the behaviors, if the personality and behaviors are there too in the subconscious, you can expect influences then from the subconscious on the previous life, and that's exactly what we see.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to add, coming back to the physical stuff, the birthmarks, and so forth on that, to me, that's all psychogenic, right? Psychogenic, the mind is creating it, right? So like I said, I mean, the things that manifest as birthmarks seem to be things that were of significance to the previous person, right? Emotional significance. And those emotional significance things then are the things that are going to be most likely for the mind, the incoming mind, then to impose on its new body. So that's how I explain that. There's no physical transference. I don't think there has to be an astral body. It can all be the mind's doing, right? The mind carries over. The memories are in the mind. They come up from the subconscious. The physical things get laid down on the new body in the course of reincarnation during the period of gestation in the new body.
Yeah. And there's been research, along these lines. There's been research that's been done recently that shows that physical and mental ailments suffered by parents can somehow imprint themselves onto the DNA of children and cause, say, someone was I don't know, a diabetic, and their child became a diabetic, it may have had something to do with an imprint on the DNA, or somebody was, if it was a mental illness, and that runs in families. This is it's research we've talked about on the show a few times. And if this is true, if they can come around and prove this for sure, and if wounds manifest from one lifetime to another in the form of defects or whatever we're talking about here as far as birth defects or birthmarks, wouldn't this suggest that who or what we truly are have nothing really to do with our physical shell and everything to do with some non-tangible, let's call it a soul? And could we follow these breadcrumbs, and somehow prove life after death, or at least the existence of the soul, by using past life regression and these birthmarks and these clues and these signs like you're talking about in your book?
Yeah, well, there are several different things there. I don't think regression takes us very far. I mean, do we just say that? I'm more concerned with the spontaneous cases. Mm-hmm. And again, we come back, you use the word soul there, and we have to be careful with that, because the soul, we have to define what we mean by soul, right? We have to explain what we mean by it, because the word soul has this religious connotation to it. Mm-hmm. So that's why, for me, I think of the soul as being consciousness, basically, right? Maybe if we want to get really philosophical about it, we can say it's really the self. The soul is more like the self. But but still, it has to do what survives death and what persists through what we call death in a discarnate state, and then it becomes associated with the new body and reincarnation, is basically consciousness. I think of it that way rather than the soul. Okay. Because it makes it much easier then to make the whole and make everything more understandable in scientific terms. Yeah. When we use the term consciousness, which we all have. I mean, yeah, there are disputes about what exactly consciousness is, but we all know we know experience it, so we know it exists. It's like, what is gravity? Well, we know the effects of gravity. Right. We don't really what causes it, but right. So if we say consciousness, we start off on better footing than if we say soul. Right, but yeah, yes. I mean, I think all of this does point to a consciousness which is separate from the body, right? Mm-hmm. But which can impact the body. I mean, the consciousness does interact with the body when we're alive, and we know that the mind can impact the body through, say, psychic healing, right? Mm-hmm. Or even through things like the placebo effect, right? Right. Where somebody is given an inert substance, made to believe that it's real and has the effect as if it were a real drug, when it's nothing, right? So, how does that come about if not through the mind? Right. So, so I think there's already a lot of evidence that the mind can affect the body. And so all I'm suggesting then really is the mind can affect the body, going all the way back to the beginning of its connection to the body in reincarnation. Yeah. This is an interesting topic. Honestly, I could sit here and talk for another couple hours about this with you, but unfortunately, we have to start wrapping up. But I do want to thank you again for coming on the show, and it's been a pleasure having you on. This is really interesting stuff, and just this one book alone, we could dig into for another couple hours here. So I'd love to have you back at some point and kind of get into either the rest of the Signs of Reincarnation book or the anything else you've worked on. Yeah, well, there's a whole lot more to talk about. I'm sorry for those interruptions. It hasn't happened before. Nah, it's no problem. I haven't had phone calls drop like that twice. Yeah, it happens. But I'd be happy to come back if you'd like to do it at some point. There's a whole lot more to talk about, as you say. Yeah, absolutely. But before you go, could you let our listeners know where they would go if they wanted to find anything that you've been working on, any of your books, any kind of research you've been working on, if they've taken an interest in the topic? Yeah. Well, I have a website they can go to, and it's jamesgmatlock.com. So, but if they're on Facebook, another thing to do is I have a group on Facebook called Signs of Reincarnation, same as the book, that group, unlike many groups on Facebook, reincarnation groups, focuses on the research as much as possible and on people's experiences, and so that's another good resource or another good opening to this research.
Okay, very good, very good. We'll put all that in our show notes, and we'll link everything so we have everybody who is interested in this topic and learning more about this. They can find your work and your books. And again, I could tell you from personal experience, they're really interesting, and the case studies are incredible. So I'll definitely love to have you back. Again, I appreciate your time, and just have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Well, thanks, Rick. Look forward to talking to you again.
All right. Take care. All right. That was James Matlock and his book, one of the books he wrote, and the one we talked about most tonight was Signs of Reincarnation. And, again, this is one of those topics that we've discussed over and over the years on the show in various contexts. And it's interesting to have somebody on that's actually done some hard-nosed research into this. He mentioned at one point in the show he's got a PhD in anthropology. I don't think I mentioned that in the bio, but he's not only someone who's a very intelligent person, obviously, and someone who has had their hand in this type of thing as far as being members of the different psychical research institutions and things like that over the years. It's hard. It's becoming harder and harder, like he said in the interview, to deny that this is a reality. And I just think that one of the things that's keeping people from buying into this wholeheartedly is that it doesn't happen to everybody. Not that reincarnation doesn't happen, but that the memories don't happen readily to everybody. So if you're one of these people who doesn't have the spontaneous memories or didn't as a child, you kind of look at it like, yeah, but it didn't happen to me. And it's got to be, I can understand that. I get it. Like, I get that it's not an easy thing to buy into, but that's where you kind of have to fall back on the research that is done by other people like Jim and many before him, and kind of look at that and say, yeah, it didn't happen to me, but there's all this evidence. It's tons and tons of evidence out there. Even somebody like Skeptic Mike has to buy into this eventually. Come on, Mike.
Eventually. Eventually. The one part that I liked when you started talking about souls, mm-hmm. I liked his response where, it has such a religious, backing to the word soul. But I understood what you were saying and where you were going with that.
Right.
And I have that whole thought process that, we have our being, we are just giant walking sacks of meat. I mean,
right.
At the end of the day, that's what we are.
Right.
What makes us us and gives us our personality and everything is something that is very well unexplained in terms of what gives us us. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it is so weird to think of that just going to nothingness after we pass. And that would, like, I've said it before on the show, I believe in energy. I believe that is energy, that that who we are, our whole being, our self,
right,
is energy, and that energy has to go somewhere,
right?
Whether it is reincarnation, whether it is just going into the beyond, whatever happens to it, something I think has to happen.
Yeah, and you kind of have to look at this in the context of a lot of other types of research, like near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. And people that talk about near-death experiences, they're in the hospital, they're in surgery, and they many, many times have been reports of people looking down on their body and being very, very nonchalant about it. Like, oh, who's that dumbass down there? Oh, that's me. And not really feeling any connection to that person laying down there, the body laying down there. Now, you would think, everything in your being would think that you would be desperately, number one, you'd recognize yourself. Number two, you would desperately be trying to get back into that body. But that doesn't seem to be the case in many cases of near-death experiences. So that would kind of speak to reincarnation. If you've been 1,000 other people over, 3,000 other, years before this, then yeah, this body is probably it's like taking off a shirt. Are you really going to worry all that much about a t-shirt that's laying on the ground? Is that mine? Oh shit. Yeah. Like it sounds ridiculous. I'm kind of making fun, but at the same time, it really does sound like that. And it's hard to wrap your brain around thinking like that because you don't think like that. We try desperately to stay alive. I talking about my own case, for the last year and a half, I got this cancer diagnosis back in 2019, and I've tried desperately through various means to stay alive. I'm not looking at it like, well, shit, I'm going to go reincarnate somewhere. No, that's not what you think. That's not natural. You try desperately to keep yourself, in this existence. So to not do that, to have a different thought process is just so completely foreign to us. So yeah, it's definitely something to think about. But I want to once again congratulate Mr. Mike on turning 114 today. He is a birthday boy. He's going to go out and do some shots later.
Oh, later? If later means as soon as we hit the outro music, then you are right, sir.
So we'll be back next week, but I do want to thank James Matlock for coming on, and we will post all of his links to his Facebook group and the Amazon links to his books on this week's show notes. And I do know that I'm a week behind in show notes. It's been a hell of a week with a lot of personal stuff going on in school, and it's kicked my ass. So I'm a little bit behind in that. So I'll get that out in the next day or two, and then we'll get this one up this weekend. All right. So for Toxic Mike, the birthday boy, I am Rick Pruitt. This has been Paradelphia, and we are out of here.